What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Brian VRM, and welcome to another Spider-Man review. Today we're going to be focusing on the 2012 reboot to the franchise, The Amazing Spider-Man. The film was directed by Marc Webbs, starring Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, Reese Ifan, and more. Now, before I begin, if you had not had a chance to check out my previous Spider-Man reviews, such as my review for the Spider-Man 2 film, as well as the Spider-Man 3 film, I'll provide links down in the description below. But with that out of the way, let's get started. In this new telling of Spider-Man, Richard and Mary Parker drop off their only son Peter at his Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house after a home invasion, and they never return. Several years later, Peter is now in high school and has since wondered about his parents' disappearance. After finding his dad's old briefcase, he learns his father did some work with Dr. Kirk Connors, a scientist at Oscorp specializing in cross-species genetics, which uses animal DNA to help cure ailments in humans. In his case, lizard DNA to help potentially regrow his lost arm. During a visit to Oscorp, Peter is bitten by a spider and soon gains the abilities of a spider. After his uncle is killed, he goes on a hunt to search for the killer while donning a red and blue suit, calling himself Spider-Man. Spider-Man is hunted by the police, led by his girlfriend Gwen Stacy's father, Captain George Stacy, and Kurt's experiment with a formula provided by Peter transforms him into a giant lizard, wreaking havoc across New York. So, I've heard quite a bit of mixed opinions about this film, mostly leaning on the negative side. But I'm going to be honest, I enjoyed this film. The approach to Spider-Man's origins was different, but I actually enjoyed some of those different aspects. Of course, I wouldn't consider this the best Spider-Man film, but before I give my rank, here's my overall thoughts, starting as always with what I liked about it. As mentioned earlier, this isn't entirely a traditional approach to Spider-Man's origin. It's understandable because they have to avoid making it identical to Sam Raimi's films. But again, I was okay with some of those changes, like Peter getting bitten on the neck where traditionally has always been his hand. I wasn't bothered by that. Or Peter being a skateboarder, well, that was more of a stretch, but again, I wasn't entirely bothered by that. I did like that they gave this version of Peter something to long for. He's been plagued with mystery for most of his life on why his parents left him, and I thought connecting that with the events that led him to being bitten by the spider all flowed very well. Normally, Peter's powers were acquired just by accident, and they still were in this case, but I like that it coincided with as part of his quest for answers about his parents. I also like that this film portrayed a journey of Peter having to become Spider-Man. In the first Sam Raimi film, there was a brief process of Peter adjusting to his new powers, and after a montage and a couple of scenes here and there, he already seems to be a pro at crime fighting. But in this case, we see him adjust to his powers throughout most of the film. Even after he's caught some criminals here and there and made his costume and his web shooters, you can clearly tell he's very sloppy as Spider-Man, and I liked seeing him progress through the film and get more confidence with his abilities. I thought the acting was very well done. Now, I wouldn't consider Andrew Garfield's performance as Peter Parker to be the best, but I did think that he did a great job portraying the whole shy teenager thing. But his performance as Spider-Man was very well done, with all the witty jokes and such, and what I liked most is that he did a great job separating Peter Parker and Spidey's mannerisms. And I'll also say that of all the Spider-Man actors, he's definitely my favorite, and I will even go far as to say that he's definitely the best actor of the three. The supporting cast did very well too. Emma Stone's performance as Gwen Stacy was very well done, and I loved the chemistry between her and Andrew Garfield. And on that note, I thought the cast in general had great chemistry with each other. Reese Ifan played Dr. Kirk Connors, aka the Lizard, which happens to be my personal favorite Spider-Man villain. I thought his performance was very good as well, and I thought his performance when he finally regrew his arm was very warming. My only issue was, even though the serum was completely messing with his mind, I had difficulty finding him intimidating when he wasn't in his lizard form. Otherwise, I thought he performed the tragedy that is Dr. Connors very well. The film's score was composed by James Horner, and I really enjoyed it. My favorite is the opening piece. I did notice that several parts of the score seem to be centered around a simple motif, which even though I can see where some may think it's too repetitive, there's been several famous works that have revolved around a simple melody or motif before. Now let's move on to some of the things I wasn't a huge fan of, starting with the cinematography. This film had over a $200 million budget, but honestly, I was surprised by that because I wasn't entirely impressed with some of the action scenes and special effects. Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film had a budget of around $139 million, and I thought that film had more impressive action and cinematography than this film did. I'm not an expert when it comes to budget, so I'm not going to make assumptions as what this film's budget went mostly into, whether it be actor's salary or the design or special effects for the lizard, but while I thought it was good, I just wasn't entirely impressed by it. There were also a couple of plot holes that I caught on to. I liked that this film featured a more tech-savvy Peter Parker, but some of his intelligence came from other sources. The equation that he gave Dr. Kirk Connors that he claimed he thought of, it was actually his father's. And he also claimed he developed the webbing himself after he apprehended a car thief, even though that webbing substance came from Oscorp. Also, I would have liked to see maybe a different motivation from the lizard, or maybe none at all. The lizard wanting to transform everyone into lizards has been used time and time again, and while I can understand that they are maybe reminiscing towards a story in the comics or the animated series, I thought it would have been cool to see Spider-Man fight the lizard just because he's a savage animal rampaging through the city and not just some mad scientist with an evil plot. I also wasn't a fan of how they tiptoed around Uncle Ben's great power and great responsibility lesson. It was never directly stated and more implied than anything. And speaking of which, the Uncle Ben death scene I thought was a little anticlimactic compared to how it's been done before. Yes, all of the elements were there, like Peter's refusal to help stop someone resulted in Ben's death, but I wasn't really fully convinced that Peter was emotionally stunned by the reveal that his uncle's killer was the same guy he failed to stop. He seemed, if anything, very mildly surprised, which again was a little anticlimactic given how powerful a moment like that should have been in his journey to become Spider-Man. Now, do I recommend that you check out The Amazing Spider-Man if you haven't already? Yes, I do. Again, despite those minor flaws, this new take on Spider-Man is enjoyable. It's not the best Spider-Man film, but it's definitely in my top 5. I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man a B+. Hey, thanks so much everyone for checking out this review. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to like this video, and if you'd like to stay updated for more of my content, then please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for my next review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Thanks so much again, everyone, and I'll see you next time.